I casually mentioned my late husband to a coworker, and she reported me to HR for faking a tragedy for attention. My husband died in a car accident when he was 26, and some days I still can't believe I'm saying those words out loud. It's been 2 years, and I've learned to keep things simple when people ask, because the last thing I want is to break down crying in front of someone I barely know at work. Most people express condolences, and we move on, trying to keep the grief from taking over the conversation. I still wear my wedding ring every single day because taking it off feels wrong, like I'm erasing him somehow. I started a new job 4 months ago, and most coworkers were respectful when I mentioned my late husband during lunch. Everyone nodded sympathetically, and the conversation moved on because nobody wants to dwell on death over sandwiches, except for Margaret. She had this look on her face like I had just told her the sky was green. A week later, she approached my desk asking invasive questions about how he died, how long we were married, whether I had pictures. I grabbed my water bottle and took a long drink, blinking hard against the pressure building behind my eyes. I told her I preferred not to discuss details at work. Her mouth tightened and she walked away, shoes clicking harder than necessary. She went full detective on my social media. My Instagram has wedding photos and pictures of my husband from before the accident, photos of us being stupidly happy in ways I'll never be again. She found his memorial Facebook page that his parents maintain with posts like "missing you today" and old photos. Because those ghosts were recent, though not posted by my husband, Margaret decided he was still alive. She found his obituary but convinced herself it was fake. Then she started telling coworkers I was lying, showing them the memorial page as proof, building this conspiracy theory around my dead husband. People started acting strange. Coworkers gave me odd looks and asked probing questions. A friendly coworker pulled me aside and told me there were rumors. I had to grip my desk when I got back because the office suddenly felt too small, walls pressing in while people whispered. Then Margaret confronted me directly in a break room with other coworkers standing right there. She asked me point blank what my husband's full name was, when exactly he died, what hospital he was taken to. She had her phone out like she was going to fact check me in real time. I stared at her, my coffee cup frozen halfway to my mouth, and told her this was inappropriate. She rolled her eyes and said, "If you're telling the truth, you should have no problem answering simple questions." I left without responding, my hands shaking. Then she cornered me by the printer and said she'd been doing research and my story didn't add up. She made passive-aggressive comments in meetings about people who fake tragedies, staring directly at me while he crawled up my neck and into my cheeks. When I walked past a conference room and saw Margaret with younger coworkers huddled around her laptop, I stopped cold. She had pulled up police photos from the accident that killed my husband. Margaret was pointing at the screen saying, "Doesn't this look staged? And look how fake this seems. And you can't even see a body, so obviously she's lying." Then I heard her say, "I bet her so-called husband is probably living in another state, and she's using this whole dead husband act to seem interesting." One of the younger coworkers asked how she even found police photos, and Margaret said, "It's all public record if you know where to look." I stood there frozen, hands balled into fists, while she gestured at those images and people nodded along. My vision tunneled until all I could see was her finger pointing at the wreckage. I turned and walked away before I did something I'd regret. The next morning, HR called me into a meeting. When I walked in, Margaret was already sitting there with this smug look on her face, arms crossed like she'd just won something. The HR manager explained that Margaret had filed a formal complaint accusing me of fabricating a personal tragedy to manipulate coworkers. Margaret jumped in and pulled out tinted screenshots of the memorial Facebook page, pointed at the recent posts, and said, "See, his Facebook page was active literally yesterday. She's been caught in her own lie." Her voice had this triumphant edge to it. She said she'd done extensive research, and my story had inconsistencies everywhere. She said she felt unsafe working with someone who would lie about something so serious. The HR manager turned to me and asked if I had anything to say. I stared at Margaret for a long moment, watching her sit there so confident she'd exposed some grand deception. Then I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and showed them my husband's death certificate. Margaret's face flickered. I showed them the obituary, the funeral home records, the memorial page she'd interpreted as proof he was alive. Then I told them about the conference room, about Margaret showing police photos of my husband's accident to coworkers and analyzing crash scene images. The HR manager's expression changed completely. She looked at Margaret and asked if this was true. Margaret's smugness evaporated and she started backtracking, saying she was just trying to protect the company. The HR manager cut her off and said this meeting was over. Margaret was called back into HR later that day, and I saw her walk out looking destroyed, face red and blotchy. She wouldn't look at anyone. 3 days later, her desk was cleared out, computer off, every trace gone. Our manager sent an email about respecting boundaries and not spreading unverified information, and everyone knew she'd been fired.